There is a young female journalist, conservative journalist by the name of Laura Loomer.
If America's men acted like Laura Loomer, our problems will be fixed in about 5 minutes.
Chained herself.
She chained her.
Welcome to episode 116 of Loomer Unleashed. I'm your host, Laura Loomer. We have a lot to talk about tonight here on Loomer Unleashed, so please be sure that you're following us on Rumble, rumble.com/Laura Loomer. You can click the green follow button, and that way you never miss an episode, and you're always notified every single time I go live. Just click the green button, or you can subscribe to my locals page and subscribe to my work for $7 a month or $70 per year by clicking the Get Loomered button. We're also live on X right now, so please be sure that you're following me on X at Laura Loomer and also on X at Loomer Unleashed, and be sure that you retweet the live stream so that everybody on X gets to see all this exciting, juicy content that we're going to be talking about. Momentarily, I'm going to be joined tonight by Florida representative in the Florida legislature, a guy by the name of Alex Andrade. Excuse me, I wanted to make sure that I pronounced his name correctly. Alex Andrade. Alex Andrade has been in the news this week. Been quite controversial here in Florida, but I'm actually loving it. Alex Andrade, that's how you pronounce his name, a very exotic sounding name. A nice last name. Alex Andrade found himself in the news this week because he's actually challenging Ron DeSantis. He's one of the few Republican lawmakers who had the balls to challenge Ron DeSantis. And you know, I've been talking about Ron DeSantis for years, right? I was one of the first to actually call out the fact that he was planning on running against Donald Trump in 2024. And people said I was crazy. They said, no, he just became governor. What makes you think that he's going to run for president of the United States? And the reality is that if you've been following Florida politics or you're familiar with the Florida GOP at all, then you know that it's one of the most corrupt Republican parties throughout the entire nation. And Alex Andrade is very familiar with that corruption as a member of the Florida legislature. And he's been personally victimized by Ron DeSantis. And now, because he actually has the integrity as somebody who has in the past, supported Ron DeSantis, Alex Andrade actually endorsed Ron DeSantis for president, not because he wanted to. He's going to get into this tonight too, but because, he was coerced. He was actually coerced by Ron DeSantis and his staff, who were going around threatening Florida lawmakers to endorse Ron DeSantis over Donald Trump. And so there's a lot that we're going to get into tonight. We're going to have Representative Andrade here with us for about an hour because the information that he's going to reveal to you is quite shocking, and it confirms what many have called a conspiracy as it relates to the conduct of Ron DeSantis and his staff. And we're also going to address the recent allegations coming out of the Department of Defense that there is a soft coup taking place against Pete Hegseth, our defense secretary. And this is something that I've been reporting on. As we know, there were a lot of GOP senators who didn't want to necessarily confirm Pete Hegseth for his position of defense secretary. I've always been an adamant supporter of Pete. He's somebody that I've known for a long time. He's a personal friend of mine, and I think he's going to do a great job as defense secretary. But it's not a surprise to anybody, or it shouldn't be a surprise at least, that the deep state and all of these rhino obstructionist senators want to have control over the military industrial complex. And so thus they put up a fight for the defense secretary position, and they adamantly oppose Pete Hegseth. And, you know, I think that even President Trump wasn't sure that Pete Hegseth was going to survive the confirmation process. And so why do I bring this up? Because there was a story that actually came out in the media. I believe it was NBC News, and we could probably get that on screen before we bring Representative Andrade on. Andrade, it's such a nice name. I wonder where that name comes from. We're going to ask him tonight because he's here with us for an entire hour. There was a story in NBC News during the week of the confirmation hearings for Pete Hegseth, and the story was Pete Hegseth is likely not going to survive the confirmation process. And so President Trump met with Casey DeSantis and Ron DeSantis at Mar-a-Lago and went golfing at his golf club in West Palm Beach and decided that Ron DeSantis is going to be the next defense secretary. Well, it's kind of true, and it's also kind of not true. What is true is the fact that Ron DeSantis is the backup position for Pete Hegseth, and he was selected by President Trump. My sources have confirmed this, to be the replacement, or rather the Plan B, Option 2 backup candidate for Pete Hegseth if Pete Hegseth didn't survive the confirmation process. Right? Pete Hegseth survived, thank God, right? He was able to get confirmed, he got voted in. However, now after Signalgate, the question is, why is there so many calls for Pete Hegseth to be fired, but there aren't calls for Michael Waltz to be fired, right? With Alex Wong, you know, the deputy national security advisor who I exposed for his ties to China, and his wife who, you know, worked to prosecute J6ers during the Biden regime. So it's really interesting. You see that there's so much vitriol. There's so many leaks coming out of the Department of Defense and so many attacks against Pete Hegseth. Well, that's because Ron DeSantis is positioning himself and is actually trying to get within the Trump administration. He wants to replace Pete Hegseth. And so what does that mean? What is that going to look like for the state of Florida? Well, obviously, Byron Donalds has filed to run for governor of Florida. President Trump has already endorsed Byron Donalds to run for governor of Florida. That is happening right now as I speak to you tonight. Jeanette Nunez, the lieutenant, or I guess I should say former lieutenant governor of Florida, because she went to go work and become the president of FIU, Florida International University, a large college here in the state of Florida. The seat for the lieutenant governor is vacant. So what happens if Ron DeSantis, who did not appoint himself to become the next senator, he appointed Ashley Moody, thus opening up the Florida Attorney General slot? You have a guy named James Uthmeyer who served as Ron DeSantis's campaign manager. If you're a longtime viewer of Loomer Unleashed, then you know we've covered extensively the corruption of James Uthmeyer, and I've reported extensively on the conflicts of interest that exist. And we're going to get into that tonight because Representative Andrade is actually calling for James Uthmeyer's prosecution, and bravely. But before I get into that, you have to understand the dynamic before I bring Representative Andrade on. The play here is for Ron DeSantis to become the defense secretary in a negotiation so that his wife decides to stand down and not run for governor of Florida. Or perhaps it would be arranged so that she could be the lieutenant governor under Byron Donalds. Although I've been told that there are other candidates for lieutenant governor, which include current members of the Florida Republican legislature. I'm not going to disclose the names of those individuals, but I do know that there is talks taking place right now to select a female member of the Florida Republican legislature to perhaps become the lieutenant governor under Byron Donalds when he is the next governor of Florida. So when I'm allowed to disclose that information, you'll be the first to know here on Loomer Unleash. But if Byron Donalds is appointed governor and Casey DeSantis stands down, the play then is for Joe Gruters to be appointed as CFO. That's the play. And then you avoid a very messy primary, and you avoid all the drama and all of the, contentious debate and all of the infighting in the Republican Party. And that's not a rumor. In fact, My next guest joining me now, Representative Alex Andrade from the 2nd District here in the state of Florida, joins me now on Loomer Unleashed to discuss what I'm calling coup de SANTIS and his efforts to prosecute the Florida Attorney General, James Uthmeier, and also the reason why he is calling for an investigation of fraud and alleged money laundering against Ron DeSantis and Casey DeSantis. Representative Andrade, thanks so much for joining me tonight here on Loomer Unleashed. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Of course, long day in committee, right? So I really appreciate you joining me. I know you've been very busy dealing with all this drama in the Florida legislature. It's always so dramatic up there in Tallahassee. There's a lot to talk about tonight. You, as I said in the introduction to this interview, you were a really outspoken DeSantis supporter. You assisted the governor with legislation as it related to going after Disney and all of the woke degeneracy that we saw with Disney supporting an assault on parental rights here in the great state of Florida. You also kind of, I guess against your own will, kind of like a hostage, you endorsed Ron DeSantis for president when he ran against President Donald Trump, although you didn't really get to do so according to your own will. And now, even though you have been what many would call a DeSantis loyalist within the Florida legislature in Tallahassee, you are now being accused of being a traitor and a rhino and a saboteur by Governor Ron DeSantis and his attorney general. I thought the attorney general was supposed to be, a nonpartisan position here, but what do I know? For calling out the fact that Casey DeSantis received $10 million for her foundation, her charity, whatever you want to call it. And those funds were used in violation of the rules set forth within a charity, 501c3 rules. You're not supposed to use those funds for political purposes to support the anti-marijuana amendments, along with other legislative issues that her husband, Ron DeSantis, the current governor of Florida, wanted to support during this last election season in the 2024 election cycle. Can you please break down the Hope Florida scandal and explain to the viewers tonight why all of a sudden, you've gone from being a DeSantis loyalist to a so-called saboteur rhino?
Well, so I'm the chair of the Healthcare Budget Committee in the Florida House, meaning I oversee the healthcare funds that we spend. It's about $35 billion of our $116 billion budget. What we found out in the past 2 weeks is that ACA, the Agency for Healthcare Administration in Florida, which manages Medicaid in Florida, they entered into a settlement with a company called SANTIS, which is a Medicaid provider in the state with a multi-billion-dollar contract with the state to administer Medicaid. Entered into a settlement for $67 million over billing for prescriptions. Instead of that money all coming back to the state, to our coffers and our bank account, someone in the governor's office had the bright idea to shave $10 million off of that settlement, say, hey, give the state $57 million and send the Hope Florida Foundation, Casey DeSantis' charity, $10 million of that settlement money. Again, these are Medicaid dollars. ACA's had to report this settlement to CMS, the federal agency. They've reported that they entered into a settlement for $67 million Medicaid dollars. That $10 million went to the Hope Florida Foundation, and within days, it immediately got wired to two dark money groups, one connected to the Florida Chamber of Commerce and one connected to Drug Free America. The second those two groups got that money, they turned around and wired it to James Uthmeier's PAC called Keep Florida Clean. So when DeSantis was looking for money to fight against the Amendment 3 campaign to legalize marijuana in Florida, someone in the governor's office had the brilliant idea to use Medicaid funds and send Medicaid funds to this PAC to fight against this amendment. We now know that James Uthmeier is the one that involved himself in the settlement with ACA and Centene. immediately reached out to these groups, told them to lie to the Hope Florida Foundation and promised the Hope Florida Foundation they wouldn't use it for political purposes. Got the Hope Florida Foundation chairman, Josh Hay, to wire this money without any oversight or approval from the board at the foundation. And then the governor's personal attorney, or one of the governor's attorneys named Jeff Aaron, helped these two groups draft their letters of request and then bird dogged the wire transfers. And literally the day after these groups got this money, they wired it to James's PAC. So I consider that wire fraud. I consider that money laundering. I think it's completely inappropriate. I don't think our Attorney General, James Uthmeier, could with a straight face right now prosecute anyone else for money laundering or wire fraud. And I think that's a terrible position for the state to be in.
Well, I think it's also a really terrible position for the state to be in, given the fact that James Uthmeier is still listed as the active chairman for Ron DeSantis' other PAC, the Florida Freedom Fund. So I don't really understand how this guy can be the Attorney General of Florida when he hasn't even divested himself from the funds. I mean, he signed the paperwork after the confirmation. So he was sworn in as Attorney General. I believe the date was February 17th. We have the article up on the website. Let's get it up on loomer.com. We published an article. And then he sent the paperwork to the Florida Division of Elections 3 days after the fact. So technically speaking, he didn't wait to divest himself from this PAC or take his name off of the paperwork as the chairman until he was officially sworn in, which is, the complete reverse of how it's supposed to be done. You're supposed to get rid of all of your conflicts, technically speaking, before you're actually sworn in, because otherwise, you are acting in an official capacity as a chief law enforcement officer here in the state of Florida on behalf of a partisan effort for the governor of Florida. And you're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to be able to potentially prosecute the governor of Florida if the evidence suggests that the governor of Florida and his wife and his associates carried out fraud, carried out money laundering, wire fraud, as you are alleging and accusing Governor Ron DeSantis. And I will say that these are not just frivolous accusations. There's a lot of evidence and documentation and hearings. And I understand that you actually requested for there to be a hearing this week. And now the governor's attorney is making all types of excuses for why he can't attend your hearing. Can you explain that? Because I saw that was kind of buried today amid the headlines. But I think that people should know that Jeff Aaron, who is now making excuses for why he can't attend your upcoming hearing as it relates to this scandal this week, Jeff Aaron, who is the governor's attorney, is best friends with James Uthmeier, who was Ron DeSantis' campaign manager for the presidential primary against President Trump. And then he was appointed by Ron DeSantis to be the attorney general less than 1 month after he transferred $1 million of funds from the Florida Freedom Fund PAC, which is now being used as a secret slush fund to support Casey DeSantis's upcoming gubernatorial run here in the state of Florida. Very similar to the PAC shenanigans that Ron DeSantis conducted and carried out when he decided to run for president, transferring funds from a state entity, Friends of Ron DeSantis, over to the federal Never Back Down Super PAC, a story that we broke here on Loomer Unleashed. But I just find it to all be so salacious and so incestuous. Yeah. I mean, how do you have a lawyer representing the governor who is best friends with the attorney general? Like, how is the attorney general of Florida supposed to objectively view this when they're on the record talking about how they're best buddies because they went to college together?
Well, the answer is you can't. And going back to some of the things you mentioned about James Uthmeier, the governor's kind of circle, especially during that presidential election, the primary, I mean, the governor's circle started dwindling to the point where he had to rely on his shrinking circle not only to do his job as governor, but also to do a ton of work on the campaign. I mean, there was no secret that James Uthmeier was making campaign calls and pressuring people from the governor's office, from the plaza level here in the Capitol. I mean, going so far as, I endorse Governor DeSantis, I would not have if I hadn't gotten multiple calls from the governor's office reminding me the budget for that year's session hadn't been signed yet. I'm a legislator. I work on getting funds for my community. That's one of the biggest responsibilities I have while I'm stuck here in Tallahassee during session. So every time they reminded me the budget hadn't been signed yet by the governor, they were telling me, hey, your name is conspicuously off this, endorsement list. We haven't signed the budget yet. If I hadn't endorsed the governor, I guarantee you a ton of my projects would have been vetoed the same way Joe Gruder's projects were vetoed that year. So I was stuck between, doing a good job for my constituents in Pensacola and Northwest Florida, or just endorsing DeSantis. And so it was kind of a tough position to be put in. One of the funnier stories is like when DeSantis released that long list of the Republican legislators in Florida that endorsed him, it was alphabetical for the first 90 some odd legislators. And then there was a handful of 10 legislators at the very bottom of this list that were not in alphabetical order. And those were all the folks who literally endorsed the guy in the 11th hour just to keep their projects from getting vetoed. So I figured I was in good company. But no, I absolutely did not appreciate the way they conflated public service with DeSantis's political ambition.
What were some of the tactics that were utilized by Ron DeSantis' staff during the primary season to threaten lawmakers like yourself? Because I remember when I was reporting on this and other people were reporting on it, Ron DeSantis said that this was fake news and that the media was lying and that this was Trump operatives trying to create a false image of the governor, when in reality, Ron DeSantis operates Tallahassee like a mob boss. And James Uthmeyer, who was working as the chief of staff for Ron DeSantis, but also working as his campaign manager. Again, another violation, because we saw that a lot of these DeSantis campaign operatives, including Christina Pushaw and Brian Griffin, and a lot of these individuals who were working, Taryn Finsk is another one of these individuals, working in the governor's office, they then found themselves openly working with the super PAC, openly working with the campaign. And it's like, there's supposed to be a 120-day, freeze out period between the campaign and the PAC. And so the question was, how are these people simultaneously all working in the governor's office and then also working on the campaign and then also attending PAC events? So it was just campaign finance violation after another, and then constant gaslighting from the Ron DeSantis campaign. And it seemed like the FEC and also just the Florida legal apparatus as a whole gave him an excuse, because I like to say Ron DeSantis's running mate was essentially Jack Smith. I mean, there were so many there's so many people were hoping that Donald Trump was going to go to jail that they just didn't give a shit. They just didn't give a shit about all these FEC violations that were out in the open. I mean, literally threatening lawmakers, we're going to cut your appropriations in the budget, and we're going to make it look like you are a deficient or incompetent lawmaker, which is what they did to Joe Gruder's, right? They literally cut the funding in the budget for his district. And the only people who suffered were people in his district, some of whom were hurricane victims. And they did this to try to retaliate against lawmakers who endorsed Ron DeSantis. And so while I'm a fan of beating a lot of people up. I'm a fan of verbally beating people up for being disloyal against President Trump and siding with DeSantis. There were a lot of people, unfortunately, like yourself, who were literally forced into endorsing Ron DeSantis.
Well, and I know President Trump made that announcement pretty soon after that announcement that all these state legislators endorsed DeSantis, that we'd all been threatened, and he was spot on. And unlike DeSantis, President Trump doesn't treat loyalty as only a one-way street. So I appreciate the fact that, the Trump apparatus has always kind of, given some grace and understood the pressure we were put under by Governor DeSantis. But what I would note is when you're looking at Governor DeSantis and his future ambitions at this point, when he came in as governor, his net worth was something like $300,000. So he was not independently wealthy like Governor Scott. He was not successful in his private life at all, like any other, like President Trump. And because of that, he started treating over time all the financial assets of the state as his own personal assets, right? He doesn't own a house other than the governor's mansion, so in 2 years he will be without a home. He's not independently wealthy. I think he's got some money from like a book deal that he did a couple years ago, but it's not some massive fund that he can live off of. It's common knowledge around here that he uses the jet that the state provided the governor as kind of his own like personal private jet. He loves that jet. I've heard from several sources in the governor's office that every time we talk about limiting his ability to use that private jet as he sees fit, he loses his mind. And he uses that jet aggressively. Like when we were having that fight over the immigration bills a few months ago, he used that jet to fly around the state and do campaign events against us. I think he is looking down the barrel in like a year and a half of like not having a house, not being gainfully employed, and trying to figure out how to.
He used the jet. He used the jet to transport himself to campaign fundraisers when he ran for president.
Yeah.
And he got caught. He got caught using FDLE security guards and the governor's plane when he was running his shadow presidential campaign during his Florida Freedom Blueprint tour for his book tour, which was just a way to, load up his own personal campaign, his own personal financial disclosure forms, because as you pointed out, he's essentially broke. Ron DeSantis and Casey DeSantis are essentially welfare queens. They don't know what it's like to have a job outside of the federal government or state government for that matter. And they don't know what it's like to even own a home because they don't own a home. Ron DeSantis, when he was a member of Congress, was living in the condo of former Republican donor and alleged pedophile, Kent Sturman. Kent Sturman, who was a big time donor, and he organized fundraisers for a lot of people up in Jacksonville, up in Tallahassee. He was Ron DeSantis's best friend, and Kent Sturman used to go and brag about how, it's great to be best friends with Ron and Casey DeSantis. And Ron DeSantis was living in his condo when he was a no-name member of the United States Congress. And then Ron DeSantis pretended like he didn't know who Kent Sturman was when he killed himself in the parking lot of a post office one day while he was under investigation for sexually assaulting a young girl and making sexual advances against a minor while his wife was dying from cancer. The story goes, and we can get the story pulled up. I mean, there was a really big Daily Mail story. I know that I was one of the first people to speak about this openly during the Republican presidential primary. But this guy whose home Ron DeSantis was living in apparently bribed this young babysitter, the 17-year-old girl, with Taylor Swift concert tickets if she lifted up her shirt and sent him photos of her boobs. And this is who Ron DeSantis' best friend is. So it's kind of interesting, right?
Going back to using assets of the state, there was one campaign report where James Uthmeyer was the #1 fundraiser for DeSantis. Imagine if Susie Wiles was Donald Trump's #1 campaign fundraiser. It would be absurd. Everybody would find that to be obscene. And for whatever reason, Governor DeSantis was perfectly fine using his public service staff, like his chief of staff and his office personnel, as campaign volunteers. They all had to fly up to Iowa to go beg people for votes. He pressured legislators to go up to Iowa as well. I wouldn't have been caught dead up in Iowa for DeSantis. He's not the type of person that engenders loyalty because he just takes from people around him. And if you don't agree with him, then you're the devil. There's so many instances of that, but to call me liberal, I passed the bill to ban DEI in higher education here in Florida. I passed the bill to ban vaccinations by force here in Florida. I've taken a ton of arrows for this guy defending his kind of, wishy-washy policies on COVID initially. I remember having to beg them to reopen during COVID. There's a lot of revisionist history that goes along with Governor DeSantis. I mean, I remember his first legislative session in 2019 where he came out in support of smokable medical marijuana and wanted to frame himself as a big environmentalist. So to see him now, he figured out some kind of weird lane to appeal to like a small subset of Republicans, and he's just been hammering that lane ever since. Like his personality has changed over time the longer he's been in the governor's office.
Seems like his whole facade of being, the best governor in the nation and the governor of the freest state in the nation, it's all been one big facade. And look, I tried blowing the whistle on this when he was running for president against President Trump. And even before he filed, I was telling everybody, hey, Governor Ron DeSantis is full of shit. When I was running for Congress, he was on Fox News talking about how he was making it illegal in the state of Florida for them to deplatform candidates running for office. Meanwhile, he didn't say a word when I was literally the only candidate in the nation denied all access to social media when I decided to run for Congress. And he didn't say shit when President Trump was deplatformed. In fact, after January 6th, Ron DeSantis invited the Capitol Police here to the state of Florida to hunt down Trump supporters. And so it's really interesting that he's now accusing you of being a saboteur and a rhino. I want to go ahead and play this clip of Ron DeSantis getting very flustered. He has no social skills. There are some people in the Florida legislature who believe that the governor suffers from Asperger's syndrome. I'm one of them. You want to comment on that? You believe that to be true?
Yeah, I mean, the way he acts and everything, I've always just kind of thought he's probably undiagnosed, but probably has something like Asperger's. Yeah.
Yeah, there were articles about it too during the presidential campaign season. And I'm not trying to poke fun at the governor for a disability or a condition that he may have. There's a lot of people who are on the spectrum who have forms of autism, who are highly successful individuals. But because the governor appears to display signs of Asperger's syndrome, he has no social skills, and he is not really able to communicate with people, which is why his campaign failed so miserably. But also he becomes very flustered when he's publicly challenged, and he doesn't have the charisma like Donald Trump does, or, a lot of these other lawmakers have, to just brush it off when he's confronted. And so we have a clip here. It's about 3 minutes long of him being confronted about the Hope Florida scandal that you are now investigating. And I just want to go ahead and play this so that people can see the governor's deflection, because, here we have somebody who was called a DeSantis loyalist, right? He loved you. He loved you during the presidential campaign, and they came to you asking you for favors. But now that you're not willing to make excuses for financial crimes, they are accusing you of essentially working with Democrats. Let's go ahead and play the clip.
I want to say one thing. So, when you're in this business, you get used to, a lot of baseless attacks. That just goes with the territory. But I do think it's really sad to see manufactured smears against the First Lady and the program that's Hope Florida. Hope Florida is actually an example of government succeeding in lifting people up. And how many examples do we have of that happening? Almost never. But the inside of Hope Florida didn't ask for any money for it for the legislature, didn't need any new policy, but just through the First Lady's initiative that we are going to reimagine the way we provide services to those in need. And so instead of the job of somebody working in these agencies to just try to get people on as many government programs as possible and keep them on indefinitely, we're transforming the role to be a hope navigator, where the job of government is to link those people in need to all the wonderful resources that we have throughout our Florida communities. So we've enlisted the faith-based community, we've enlisted charitable organizations, we've enlisted businesses, and we've enlisted individual volunteers who answer the call when somebody comes in need. The needs go into a care portal, and all of a sudden you have a single mom that doesn't have a place to stay. It's not the bureaucracy that's going to lift her up. It's the church that comes over, or the charity that comes over to do that. And what are the results since this has been implemented? We've gotten 30,000 people off welfare and saved the state of Florida $100 million. And so that's a great success story. Now, that's a success story that threatens some people. That's a success story that's going to invite attacks because people have their own political agenda. And I got to tell you, I'm used to the baseless smears from liberal media. I'm used to the baseless smears from Democrats. I've been dealing with it for over 6 years. It's par for the course. But I think now we have Republican leadership in the Florida House joining with liberal media and joining with Democrats to launch baseless smears against Hope Florida and by extension myself and the First Lady. Let me tell you something. None of these Republican leaders got elected on the platform that they were going to launch baseless attacks against the governor and First Lady. That is not why they got elected. Had they run on that, they would have lost their primaries. They would never have been elected in the first place. No, they were elected to continue our success in Florida, to build off the great achievements of the last 6 years. They were elected to cut property taxes, which they refused to do. They were elected to help alleviate and end the condo crisis, which the Florida House has refused to do. They were elected to continue our Florida First agenda. And what are they doing with their actions? Not only are they trying to sabotage that agenda, but they are stabbing the voters in the back with their behavior. Shame on you in the Florida House and your terrible behavior and leadership. Questions? Yes.
So because you're not a drone and because you don't want to excuse corruption in your own political party, you are betraying the voters, Representative Andrade. You are a traitor to the Republican Party and the people who voted for you, because in the eyes of Ron DeSantis, you should just be excusing everything that he does. If he wants to go shoot his dog in the face, you should go along with it because, hey, he's the governor of Florida. If he wants to rob a bank, hey, you should go along with it because he's the governor of Florida. If he wants to commit alleged wire fraud or alleged money laundering, you should go away with it because he's the governor of Florida, right? I mean, this is how the DeSantises operate. They operate like a mob boss, right? This is how Ron DeSantis operates in Tallahassee. It's like, do as I say or else. And I think maybe beforehand, when he had the media under his control and people were not awakened to how disloyal this man truly is and how corrupt he truly is and how he is so calculated and cunning in everything that he does, from appointing his own Secretary of State, Cord Byrd, with the knowledge that Cord Byrd would go ahead and change the Florida PAC laws for him so that he could transfer millions of dollars, over $80 million from his state PAC to the federal PAC, to hand selecting the Secretary of State. And people believe that he bribed and actually had his fund send money to the former, or I guess current, former Speaker of the House in Florida. We have a new Speaker of the House, Danny Perez, who's since challenging Ron DeSantis, but the former Speaker of the House and the Senate leader, the FEC records reveal that ahead of the Republican primary, they received hefty campaign contributions from Ron DeSantis's political entities, and many people believe it was so that they would support him changing the resign to run law, something that applied to Congressman Byron Donalds when he was a Florida lawmaker and wanted to run for Congress. He had to resign. But Ron DeSantis, of course, wants to have the best of both worlds. He wants to run a presidential campaign on taxpayer dime, and he wants to receive the salary as the governor of Florida, which is why he hand selects people who are going to do his bidding. That's why he selected Cord Byrd. That is why he had Jeanette Nunez, right? Another Trump hater who went around calling President Trump a member of the KKK and accusing him of being an anti-Black racist. That's why he's appointed James Uthmeyer. So my question to you is, what's the next step? Who's going to be referred for prosecution? And do you think that Ron DeSantis should resign as governor of Florida?
Well, if the question about do I think DeSantis should resign is, do I want to be subjected to more of those like whiny toddler tantrum press conferences where like I have to hear his accent? I've always described his accent as like a mix between New Jersey and toddler. Like I'm just so fed up with hearing his kind of like whiny nasally tone constantly. Yeah, Yeah,
Yeah,
I'd prefer he
Ron
resign.
DeSantis here. It's like a very nasally voice, and you're not going to get away with this. And it appears to me that President Trump doesn't want to have free and fair elections. Yeah, I mean, it's like the most annoying voice. But don't get me started. We had a competition between whose voice is more annoying between him and his wife, Jill Casey. I don't know. I can't listen to her with her rants where she's like hyperventilating about how she, oh my God. And it's like therapy every single time I get to go to a campaign event with my husband because I can't stand being around my toddlers because it's so stressful being a mother of 3 young kids. So thanks so much for having me here tonight because it's like therapy, right? Every single time she talks, it's like she's almost like using the time to talk to the audience or whichever crowd she's speaking to as a form of therapy because it sounds like she can't even stand being around her own children.
Well, I'd rather he resign than have to be subjected to his nasally tone for another year and a half. He's going to term out, obviously, and obviously he's so fixated on the Florida House right now. He's welcome to run for the Florida House when he terms out if he doesn't resign first, if he thinks he can do our job better. But no, as far as who might be prosecuted right now, I do believe that James Uthmeyer should be subject to a federal investigation and prosecution. I believe that he directed $10 million of Medicaid money, that within 2 weeks of this settlement with Centene, $10 million was directed to this charity, then extracted immediately from this charity. And then he got $8.5 million of those Medicaid dollars sent to his own personal PAC. The timing of that alone is damning. And the fact that he was involved every step of the way is also damning. So I do believe James Uthmeyer should be prosecuted by federal authorities.
Yeah.
And investigated by the FBI. I haven't seen any direct contact with Casey on this. I think the bad part for Casey specifically is that she's taken so much credit for Hope Florida. That she's associated with all of Hope Florida's shortcomings. So she just looks incompetent. She's welcome to run for governor still. There's no prerequisite of competence for someone to file for governor, but she absolutely looks incompetent based on the fact that she's
because it's her political baby. She doesn't have any qualifications to become governor. So they're trying to manufacture this make-believe charity and make it sound like it's saved so many people's lives here in the state of Florida and that it's done so much good so that they can manufacture a resume the same way that they manufactured a political resume for Ron DeSantis when he decided to run for president. I want to read to you a section from an exclusive report I released last week on my website, and I want to get your comments on it because I believe that this warrants an investigation. So as you mentioned before, Ron DeSantis's handpicked AG, James Uthmeyer, who was his campaign manager for his presidential campaign against Trump, operated a PAC called Keep Florida Clean. So the article that I released said, separately, Keep Florida Clean, Inc., chaired by James Uthmeyer, donated $1.1 million to the Florida Freedom Fund on December 12th, 2024, followed by an additional $131,000 on February 4th, 2025. These contributions came after the 2024 election and shortly before Uthmeyer's appointment as Florida Attorney General, as announced by Ron DeSantis on January 16th, 2025. So, the question I have is, if the elections are over and Ron DeSantis is termed out as governor, why is his PAC accepting so many contributions after the 2024 presidential election? We were told that the Florida Freedom Fund needed these funds. We know that Ron DeSantis doesn't support Randy Fine, and he didn't want to get involved in the race with Jimmy Patronis. And so what exactly were these funds used for? It's kind of strange that, in an off political year, the governor is doing millions of dollars of political fundraising. And I truly believe that the Florida Freedom Fund, which is Ron DeSantis's PAC, which is chaired by James Uthmeyer, is going to be used as a slush fund for Casey DeSantis's gubernatorial run. I want to continue. These contributions came after the 2024 election and shortly before Uthmeyer's appointment as Florida Attorney General, announced by DeSantis on January 16th, 2025, right? So people can imagine this. The $1.1 million was donated from Uthmeyer's one PAC, Keep Florida Clean, to Ron DeSantis on December 12th, okay? Over a month after the presidential election and the Florida elections. And then additionally, another contribution on February 4th. Then Ron DeSantis announced his nomination of Uthmeier on January 16th. And then Uthmeier was sworn in on February 17th. So about 12 days or so before he was sworn in, he made sure to dump the rest of the money that was in Keep Florida Clean over to Ron DeSantis's other PAC. But then he waited until 3 days after he was officially sworn in as the Attorney General of Florida to officially file paperwork with the Florida Division of Elections to disband, as is seen by the form signed by Uthmeier and received. And of course, they put a stamp that said vote no on 3 on the official paperwork for the Florida Division of Elections, which is kind of asinine given the fact that, the election was already over and they already won as it related to that, that issue of defeating the marijuana lobby, which is, another ethics violation given the fact that some of Ron DeSantis's biggest donors, while he was trying to run this massive statewide campaign against Amendment 3, were people from the hemp industry who, in addition to donating to Ron DeSantis, also supported James Uthmeier's political entities. And so it just seems like one big slush fund. And what I want to know is, are you going to be doing an investigation into the Florida Freedom Fund as well, and the ethics around Uthmeier waiting until 3 days after he was officially sworn in as AG of Florida to disband the PAC that gave all of its money to Ron DeSantis?
So I would say yes if I was a federal prosecutor, right? If I was an FBI agent, I'd say yes. I'm just the healthcare budget chair. So my jurisdiction, the only reason why all of this stuff has come to light related to Hope Florida is because that's within my jurisdiction as the healthcare budget chair. I think somebody absolutely should look into it. The cavalier hubris that's being exhibited by the DeSantis camp on this stuff is kind of shocking. I mean, James Uthmeier all but admitted, yeah, I did steer this $10 million in Medicaid money to my PAC. But hey, we won on Amendment 3, so it's all good. I did it for the kids. I committed money laundering and wire fraud for the kids, so it's okay. That's just indicative of the culture in Governor DeSantis' kind of shrinking, inner circle. So if I was able to catch on to this in the course of like 2 weeks of looking into it, absolutely, I think that there's more there, more wrongdoing that they've committed. It's just I'm not, as the healthcare budget chair, in the position to like really do that beyond the Hope Florida stuff. I have talked to federal authorities. I think they are looking into it. So I think that, yeah, if they, do have an official prosecution, more than the Hope Florida stuff will be looked into. And I sincerely hope that they do take it up, because I'm convinced beyond all doubt that James Uthmeier knew he was committing wire fraud and money laundering and just thought he was okay to do it. Like that's how they operate. It's like, how dare you call me out on my misuse of taxpayer funds? They're acting put out by the fact that state legislators are doing their job, looking into their spending and also providing oversight. There's a weird culture over here right now in the governor's office. And no, I absolutely think it needs to be looked into.
Yeah, and it also extends down to the donor class as well. Ron DeSantis doesn't just issue these retaliatory actions himself. And also, a lot of people aren't aware of this, but Casey, his wife, has an office that is within the governor's office. So a lot of people think that he's grooming her to become the next governor of Florida. But that leads me to my next question is, I mean, you obviously believe that the DeSantis family stole $10 million from the citizens of Florida via James Uthmeier, who, they selected to be the new Attorney General of Florida. What are your thoughts on this theory that's swirling around Tallahassee? And have you actually heard this theory in Tallahassee that Ron DeSantis is being groomed to become the replacement for Pete Hegseth? Right. So a way for him to kind of dodge the accountability with this scandal that's brewing. And if if there is enough fervor in Washington, D.C. to actually remove Pete Hegseth in this deep state shadow campaign that seems to be taking place right now to attack him and remove him as defense secretary, that Governor Ron DeSantis would then become the new defense secretary, and that would be a way for President Trump to negotiate Casey DeSantis standing down so that she doesn't launch a gubernatorial campaign against Congressman Byron Donalds, who has officially filed to run for governor of Florida and has received President Trump's endorsement.
So I'll premise this by saying I have not endorsed Byron Donalds. I mean, when Matt Gaetz was up to become U.S. Attorney General, I was all in on Matt Gaetz then running for governor. I'm still holding out some kind of like weird hope that Matt Gaetz might reconsider and run for governor still, even though he, says he's not interested right now. So I don't really have a dog in the hunt related to who's the next governor of the state of Florida.
Right. But as it relates to this theory that Ron DeSantis is, regardless of who you support for governor of Florida, because there are some people that said, this isn't actually happening, but we have a tweet from Roger Stone today who quote tweeted my post, and he actually, we can get that tweet up on the screen, and he actually said that his sources are telling him the same thing. We'll get it pulled up on the screen and you can see it for yourself. But apparently there's this whole plan in place to then make Joe Gruters the CFO of Florida, Byron Donalds the governor, and then he would be able to choose as the acting governor appointed by DeSantis his lieutenant governor, and then run with an incumbent protection or incumbent privilege. Here we go. We have this up on the screen here. I'm hearing the same thing from my sources. We can open up the tweet below. Amid the deep state's efforts to fire Pete Hegseth as defense secretary, Governor Ron DeSantis has pitched himself as a replacement to be defense secretary. If this happens, he would likely make his wife his replacement as acting governor of Florida ahead of the 2026 Florida gubernatorial election, so that she would have an incumbent privilege. There has been a lot of speculation about making Casey DeSantis lieutenant governor of Florida, but these discussions were happening at the same time Pete Hegseth's confirmation hearing was taking place and Ron was lining up to be his replacement. The position of lieutenant governor is currently vacant after FIU president Jeanette Nunez resigned in February. She's the new FIU president, of course, to become the president of Florida International University. Deep state gonna deep state. But now there's discussions. Go ahead. I want to let you.
I think Ron DeSantis regrets not appointing himself to be U.S. senator.
Instead of Ashley Moody.
Yeah, and so I do think that he's been asking his circle to try and float this rumor about him becoming defense secretary, because he is looking for an out. Again, he has nowhere to live. He does not own a house when he turns out in a year. He doesn't have any kind of I don't know what he would do other than maybe, I don't know, go be a lawyer for a law firm or go be part of some think tank up in DC. So
maybe he would serve on the board of Boeing. Maybe he's such a war hawk. He loves Ukraine so much. Maybe he can go serve with his good buddy Adam Kinzinger.
Yeah, like Lockheed Martin or something. But
Lockheed Martin, Boeing.
I think he would float himself as defense secretary right now, because again, he's looking for a landing place when he turns out as governor. I don't think he could appoint his wife to be the lieutenant governor, but I think that he would appoint a lieutenant governor who would promise him and make some type of public commitment they wouldn't run for governor in a year and a half. Because I think that he's viewing his wife running for governor as some way to maintain some type of livelihood after he terms out. So at this point, I don't know why Trump would want to subject himself to Ron's accent either, or the constant whining. And my heart would go out to any staff over at the DOD if he got up there and they had to be subjected to that constant whining too. But, it's possible that President Trump could see this as an opportunity to structure his own state cabinet here in Florida of people that he believes in and supports. He obviously supports Byron Donalds. He obviously supports Joe Gruters. So it's possible that he could set it up that way if he sees that opportunity. One thing that I do know is Governor DeSantis has taken an idea of mine and tried to use it to ingratiate himself to President Trump, which is the concept of President Trump's library being built here in Florida. So I sponsored a bill in the House, and my friend Jason Broder sponsored it in the Senate, to essentially say local governments couldn't interfere when President Trump wants to go place his presidential library somewhere here in the state of Florida. The idea being, I don't want any kind of liberal zoning board in Palm Beach preventing President Trump from building his library, where he wants and how he wants. Apparently, Governor DeSantis has taken that and has been, trying to talk to Trump about the idea of his presidential library coming here to Florida as a way to ingratiate himself to President Trump. So, maybe President Trump can cut a deal and, at the same time, lock up the governor and CFO position in the state. So we'll see.
Yeah, it's definitely really interesting. Another question that I have for you is, do you think that the Florida Chamber is complicit in all of this in an effort to carry out a pay-for-play in exchange for Floridians' rights under the guise of tort reform? We know that Ron DeSantis, one of his big things was this whole concept of tort reform, which is just his way of helping his buddies in the insurance industry so that he could load up with millions of dollars in preparation for his presidential campaign against President Trump. And then, of course, President Trump slammed Ron DeSantis for this during the primary, calling it the biggest insurance scam ever. We're now seeing insurance scams like this play out in other places like South Carolina. So what do you think about that? Do you think that the Florida Chamber is complicit in Ron DeSantis's actions and his money laundering or alleged money laundering and just really the facade, right, of transparency and strong leadership that he has projected onto the people of Florida during his time as governor of Florida?
Well, shoot, I think the Florida Chamber, with their 501c4 Secure Florida's Future, were complicit and participated in the money laundering and wire fraud of this $10 million. Mark Wilson's the CEO of the Chamber of Commerce. He's one of the ones that sent those dishonest letters that extracted the $5 million grants from the Hope Florida Foundation. He's shown no remorse, and he's not shared any information with me about it. He seems to think, it was perfectly fine to commit this money laundering and wire fraud. So no, I absolutely think that they're participating, like the executives over at the Chamber, with Governor DeSantis's kind of misdeeds. To include this one specific instance where $10 million in Medicaid money were illicitly transferred.
DeSantis. Why do you think that Ron DeSantis decided to select an attorney, Jeff Aaron, who's best friends with his former campaign manager and now Attorney General James Uthmeier? Do you think that they coordinated this from the get-go as a way to run cover with each other? Because I think it's really interesting. Through this investigation, I've discovered that the attorney for Keep Florida Clean is the same attorney for Hope Florida, who's also the same attorney for Ron DeSantis.
Yeah. So, well, there were two attorneys, but Jeff Aaron is, the governor's kind of, go-to attorney for a ton of stuff right now. He was planted at the Hope Florida Foundation, and he actually there's text messages where he was assisting these two groups to get this money from the Hope Florida Foundation, and then after he got them to send those letters to the foundation, he bird dogged the wire transfer, meaning he was texting with these groups and them, have you got the money yet? Mm-hmm. And literally the next day after he confirmed that he got the money was wired to James Uthmeier's PAC. So no, I absolutely believe that Jeff Aaron and James Uthmeier conspired to do this.
Would you encourage people who donated to any of these groups who have now discovered that their money has been given to Ron DeSantis's other entities, including his Florida Freedom Fund, which is now, as we discussed earlier, being used as a slush fund in preparation to support Casey DeSantis's gubernatorial campaign? Would you encourage people who gave money to these entities to band together to file a class action lawsuit?
I don't know what folks who donated to Keep Florida Clean would have a claim on. I would encourage the Hope Florida Foundation to act like they've been defrauded of $10 million, because they have. I think that the Hope Florida Foundation's 501c3 status is in question next year. There's no way they can. There's no way that they can justify this transfer of these funds, knowing they went to a PAC, and still maintain their 501c3 status. So if I were advising folks as a lawyer to a client, I would absolutely tell the Hope Florida Foundation they have to sue this chamber entity and this other entity to get their money back.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, it looks like they're also complicit in the fraud and the money laundering.
How can the taxpayers get their money back?
In this circumstance, unfortunately, I don't think that there's a way to get their money back. James Uthmeier has already spent it, or Governor SANTIS has already spent it. So the only way for like Hope Florida to get it back is to file suit against these 501c4s. But I'm willing to bet neither of them have any more money in their accounts at the moment.
I know you said that you're calling on federal investigators to investigate this matter. What would you say to Attorney General Pam Bondi or FBI Director Kash Patel if they were here with us today?
That Florida's Attorney General committed money laundering and wire fraud, and I hope that they would pursue that for the money laundering and wire fraud that it is. I mean, this is public corruption at its grossest.
So do you think that Pam Bondi and Kash Patel should issue a statement about this? I mean, I know that that Pam Bondi, of course, herself was the former Florida Attorney General, and now this directly involves Ron DeSantis's hand-selected candidate for the Florida Attorney General. But what do you think it's going to take to get somebody like Pam Bondi to issue a statement? I like to call her Blondie. But what can we do to get Blondie to issue a statement about this? Maybe we can get her booked on Fox News. We gotta do something to get more action from the DOJ on this, because, look, there seems to be this issue or this resistance within the Republican Party, which is why I wanted to have you on my program tonight, because so many Republicans are so afraid to call out other Republicans who commit crimes or other Republicans who are involved in wrongdoing. And so, why is this? Do you think that they're protecting him on a federal level? Do you think that we can expect to see any type of accountability? Or do you think that this is just going to, be another year of Ron DeSantis gaslighting Florida citizens and Florida lawmakers, accusing solid Republican representatives of being rhinos for asking questions about where the damn money went?
All of this information's come out in the past week. I don't blame the Department of Justice for not, making a statement on it already. I mean, federal investigations take time. So, I mean, this is all literally coming out in real time in these like state house subcommittee meetings. So no, unless like an FBI agent's there taking notes and collecting documents right as we're talking about it, I wouldn't blame them for not being fully aware of what's going on yet. I can tell you that they're becoming aware, they're looking into it. But no, I don't blame them for not giving a statement yet. I would say in a month, if a statement hasn't been made, they're probably resting on their laurels and thinking hard about whether or not they want to, prosecute a Republican. But at this point, I just think this is brand new information that's been coming out in real time in the past week and a half.
What can you tell us about your upcoming hearing? There was an article that came out today in Florida Politics. I'm looking at it right now. Hope Florida Council can't make Thursday hearing. Alex Andrade wants a special Friday hearing to question him. Why did the governor's attorney not make your hearing?
So in the Florida legislature, we publish our committee schedules a week in advance, essentially. So on Friday, not a week, but several days in advance. So on Friday last week, we published our schedule. It showed that I had a block of time on Thursday from 8 a.m. to 12 to have my committee meeting this week, where I intended to have Jeff Aaron, the lawyer, Mark Wilson from the chamber, and Amy Rosenhausen from Drug Free America, or Save Our Society from Drugs, come and explain themselves and their actions and talk about exactly what happened, who they connected with, and everything like that. Jeff Aaron, after my schedule was published, in what looked to me to be like an attempt to act like you're being transparent, emailed me and said, "Hey, I'm more than happy to testify, but I'm not available on Thursday, but I'm more than happy to do it on Wednesday or Friday," like after my schedule was out. So thankfully, I asked the speaker to give me a second block of time on Friday this week, and he did. So I will have an extra special meeting to accommodate Jeff Aaron's busy schedule on Friday, and I expect him to attend and explain himself.
What documents have you requested ahead of this hearing from Hope Florida, Centene, Jeff Aaron, and Casey and Ron DeSantis?
bank records, communications about the settlement, communications about the wire transfers, all emails, all documents related to the settlement negotiation with Centene, text messages, contracts, anything like that. I expect to get a lot of documents tomorrow from certain specific individuals who have been willing to participate and don't want to appear like they're complicit in this fraud. I haven't gotten anything from a state agency yet, so I'll be curious to see if I get anything from these state agencies that are technically supposed to be, partners in public service here in the state. They also have public records requirements that I sincerely hope they comply with. But yeah, I mean, imagine right now me asking the Attorney General's office for documents related to the settlement, and imagine how quickly you think James Uthmeyer is going to get right on that to help provide those documents to me.
It's just shocking. I think it's absolutely shocking that, this guy was, this close to potentially becoming the Republican nominee for president if the deep state and all of the rhinos who wanted Donald Trump to be jailed got their way. It's just so shocking. This is the type of behavior that you would expect from Democrats, right? The acts of money laundering, wire fraud, lying, appointing your close associates to be in positions of power and appointing them so that they can do your bidding and cover up your dirty work.
Well, yeah, I mean, so I would look at Ron DeSantis's lifestyle as far more similar to Joe Biden's than President Trump's, right? I mean, Joe Biden was a career government employee, a career politician. Ron DeSantis has been the same. Neither of these people have any sources of funds outside of their public offices, and so their lifestyles look very similar. That's why you see these kind of, abuses and overuses of taxpayer dollars for personal lifestyle activities. It's not shocking to me to see it kind of unfold the way it is, but it's still disappointing.
What do you think it's going to take for more Florida lawmakers to publicly start calling for Ron DeSantis's resignation?
It's a good question. I mean,
I know you said that you prefer James Uthmeyer for prosecution, but do you think that this scandal warrants Ron DeSantis's resignation?
On its face, I don't have any information saying Ron DeSantis was super active in any of this. I think, in reality, my assumption would be that the only activity Ron DeSantis had directly on this was when James Uthmeyer wanted to get an attaboy from the governor and say, "Look how good a job I did, got you, $10 million in Medicaid funds to the campaign." So I wouldn't say I'm calling for the governor's resignation right now. I would just say I'm calling for the governor to do a better damn job in his last year and a half, right? I mean, this $10 million is not the only $10 million that was wasted by this individual agency. 3 weeks ago, we were talking about how ACA misplaced $160 million. We gave them $160 million to pay a federal fine, and they essentially put it in the wrong bank account and used it as cash flow instead. So now we're faced with the fact that we have to give them another $160 million to pay the same darn federal fine they were supposed to pay 3 years ago. Every time people think about Governor DeSantis and his celebratory press conferences, they're almost always associated with bill signings. It's very evident to me at this point that Governor DeSantis might have been a great legislator. He's a terrible governor. And he thinks like a legislator. He acts like a legislator. He does not think or act like a true manager. He treats his office the way a legislator would necessarily potentially treat their office. He's not acting like a manager. And some of these failures would have never happened if Senator Scott was still in the governor's office. Senator Scott was an incredible executive, an incredible manager.
That's why I always laugh when people say Ron DeSantis is the best governor. I'm like, then you haven't lived in Florida under Governor Rick Scott, because Governor Rick Scott was a phenomenal governor. And for full disclosure, when I was in college, I was the president of College Republicans. I did some work for Governor Rick Scott, and I worked with the Republican Party of Florida. And I'll tell you, I was just a nobody college student, I was the president of College Republicans, and every single time that man saw my face, he would say, "Laura, great to see you again." And I was just so stunned that, he remembered my name. And every single time I would see the governor, I have no idea how he got my address, but I guess, you know, as the governor of Florida, you can get anybody's address if you live in the state of Florida. But he would get my address no matter where I lived, and he would send me handwritten thank you notes. I still have those thank you notes. I saved them because they're important to me. But he really actually had the people skills. That's something that Ron DeSantis severely lacks. And I think he was a phenomenal governor. I would say that he was 10 times the governor that Ron DeSantis wishes he could be.
Yeah, and he's far less of a career politician than DeSantis. He obviously had a very successful business career. He's got an independent perspective outside of government employment that I think makes him an even better public servant. And no, to your point, like, yeah, he sends, you know, signed birthday cards to my 2-year-old daughter. You know, like he's a great public servant. And I'm proud to have him as my U.S. Senator for the state of Florida.
Yeah, me too. I think he does a fantastic job. One other thing
I'm sorry, where did you go to college?
Say that again?
Where'd you go to college? I'm sorry, I don't know this.
Oh, I went to Barry University. So I did a semester first at Mount Holyoke, and it was a women's school. And, you know, when I went to boarding school, and I was always told, oh, you know, you have to go to the most elite school. And so I was waitlisted at Dartmouth, and I was like heartbroken over the fact that I couldn't go to Dartmouth. And I had my choice between all these different schools. I applied to a lot of liberal arts colleges on the East Coast. And I was kind of naive, you know, when I was in boarding school thinking, oh, you know, I have to go to the most expensive liberal arts school on the East Coast or else no one's going to take me seriously. And I did a semester at Mount Holyoke, which was considered Harvard for women back in the day when Harvard was all male. And I excelled. I did phenomenal. You know, I had a 4.0 GPA. It wasn't the issue, but I was miserable. I literally ate every single meal by myself. I was surrounded by hostile teachers, hostile professors, and you know, in my dormitory, I just felt like I didn't have any friends, and everybody there was so radical. It was such a radical campus, and everybody was a liberal. And I hated it so much, and I was so depressed that I just decided that I was going to transfer literally after one semester. I didn't even finish a whole year. So I just transferred to, I would have had to take an entire gap semester if I didn't go to a school that I had already applied to. And I applied to Barry as a safety school. And I thought, whatever, you know, it's Miami. How bad could it be? And I wanted to, you know, work and be involved in a Republican club. So I resurrected the College Republican Club at Barry University, and I started doing work for the Republican Party of Florida, and, you know, it worked out pretty well. I made it one of the most successful college Republican clubs in the state of Florida.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, it sounds like you're progressively moving north in the state like I am. I grew up in Fort Lauderdale, and now I'm, you know, on the opposite end of the state over in Pensacola.
Yeah, I keep on moving up the state, right? So I ran for Congress on Palm Beach and, you know, lived in the Villages. But I really like Florida, and that's why I always laugh when people say, oh, you know, Ron DeSantis is so great. Florida would be awful without him. And personally, I feel like my quality of life was better under Rick Scott. I mean, I'm just comparing like my standard of living. Obviously, you know, I was a college student then, but in terms of like the cost of living, I feel like it's only increased. I just don't really see the appeal. I've never seen the appeal in Ron DeSantis. I got in trouble when I was running for Congress as a Republican in the Villages, making comments like this, and people would freak out because it was the first time they ever heard anybody, and it was very taboo to speak out about Governor Ron DeSantis, and it still was during the Republican primary. And now a lot of people are starting to, you know, see these scandals for what they are. One of the last things I want to ask you before you go, because you've been very gracious and generous with your time tonight. You know, this isn't the only scandal that we've seen here in the state of Florida as it relates to Ron DeSantis this legislative session. We've had several scandals involving Ron DeSantis this session, including the buried insurance profit report and the new, you know, Speaker of the House has been very brave in calling this out and calling out Ron DeSantis's insurance scam and asking why this report was buried. And now we also have the $10 million donation to Casey's group, Hope Florida. Are there any other scandals that you're aware of that maybe the media is not talking about, or maybe they're just not receiving the attention that they deserve? I mean, of course, from the scandal of collecting an entire year's worth of salary as governor of Florida while ditching the entire state to go run for president.
Have you heard about the 2,000 missing cars?
I have not. What is this story? You're dropping bombs on my show. Let's hear about this scandal.
So similar to like the, how they just misplaced $160 million in their bank account and use as cash flow. In another state agency called Department of Management Services, they're supposed to be essentially like the HR department agency for the entire state. And they're also supposed to keep track of all the state's assets, like their land, property, and personal property. When we asked them, hey, can you provide us an inventory of all the state's vehicles? They could not provide information or the locations of over 2,000 state-owned vehicles. So imagine right now, like even a small percentage of that having been stolen or misused by a state employer, just like walked off the job. We have 2,000 unaccounted for cars in the state that they just can't tell us where they are. And they've pretty much told us they have no intent on getting us that information before the end of session. They don't seem to care or see the problem with that.
So these are state workers using vehicles that are essentially state vehicles, and now they're using these state vehicles as their personal vehicles. Sounds a lot like what Ron DeSantis does. He doesn't have a car, he doesn't have a house. That's what he does. He uses state vehicles for his own personal transportation. He's been caught doing this multiple times.
Yeah, and when they essentially refused to provide all this information, we told the secretary for DMS, hey, we're going to withhold your salary until you actually do what we told you to do and give us this information. He responded and said, I'll just wait you guys out and get my salary and back pay. Like, I'll just wait until you guys are gone and get my salary and back pay. Like, that's how brazen and cavalier they are with 2,000 missing state vehicles. Like this is state property, millions of dollars worth of state property. And we have a state agency.
What kind of cars are we talking about? Like, are we talking about like big black SUVs, or what kind of vehicles are these?
They run the gamut, and it's across multiple state agencies. But I cannot imagine running a business and not knowing where 2,000 vehicles are located. Yeah, I'm assuming at some point we're going to discover that several have been stolen or gone missing. Or at least gone home with state employees that may have left the job or been fired. We also had, pay raises given to positions that don't have employees in them. Like Governor DeSantis has asked us to give pay raises to these jobs that don't represent an actual employee. It's like you want to get Doge here in the state of Florida. We need to get Elon Musk down here to actually Doge DeSantis and his operation, because there is so much fraud, waste, and abuse. It's insane.
What do you think about James Uthmeyer using high-profile cases as a way to distract from his own unethical behavior as the DeSantis-appointed AG? For example, his random state investigation into the Tate brothers upon their arrival in the state of Florida, and then additionally the announcement 6 months after the fact that they were finally going to be charging Ryan Routh, the man who was arrested outside of President Trump's West Palm Beach golf club with a rifle after he attempted to assassinate the president. Do you think there should be an investigation into Uthmeyer's abuse of power as well? I mean, a lot of people want to know how he can investigate the Tate brothers, given the jurisdiction. They were simply just visiting the state of Florida, having meetings in Miami, South Florida. I understand that it was individuals in the Trump administration who allegedly helped them get into the United States of America. And then additionally, it just seems very bizarre that it would take James Uthmeyer and Ron DeSantis 6 months to finally announce charges for Ryan Routh, the man who tried to assassinate President Trump. It just almost seems like they're trying to use the high-profile news cycle events to mask their scandals. Thoughts on that?
There's no question that the Tate brothers commentary was politically motivated, right? Like, I don't know, and I cannot see any type of jurisdictional nexus between the state of Florida and what they've been accused of outside of the country.
In Romania. It's like it just doesn't make any sense.
So, there's no question that James Uthmeyer was just attention headline grabbing when he was saying that stuff. I cannot possibly see, unless somehow they can say that they try to lure someone from Florida specifically, but there's no evidence of that. There's nothing I've seen that relates to that. And so for James to kind of do that kind of grossed me out. But no, I mean, this is a guy that was.
Well, it's also hypocritical, right? It's hypocritical given the fact that Ron DeSantis' best friend is a pedophile. Ken Sturman. I mean, you want to go after the Tate brothers and accuse them of sex crimes, but Ron DeSantis still hasn't provided an explanation as to why he lived in a pedophile's home.
Yeah. No.
I mean, I think it's a little strange. Don't you think it's a little strange? A lot of people don't know this about Ron DeSantis, but it is a fact that when he was a member of Congress, he was living in the home of Kent Sturman, who you can pull up that Daily Mail article again, was under investigation for sex crimes with a minor before he decided to blow his brains out. Maybe he just couldn't handle the pressure. Some people believe that he may have actually been murdered too, as a way to, silence controversy ahead of the presidential primary. But Sturman with an O.
I don't know much about the Sturman stuff, but I do know that he was under investigation. I know those circumstances. What I would be
there's a Daily Mail article if you type in Kent Sturman.
Yeah.
What I'd be curious about right now, and you can see the allegations, but.
I just can't wait to see the first time that James Uthmeyer tries to prosecute anyone for money laundering and wire fraud. I just cannot wait to see him try with a straight face say that someone should go to prison for money laundering and wire fraud, given what I know about what he did in the circumstance with Medicaid money.
Well, it seems like there's a lot of hypocrisy. We have the article now pulled up. Let's go ahead and go through this. It's just really interesting. They tried to get all of this attention with the Tate brothers. Exclusive prominent DeSantis ally, it was his actual best friend, who shot himself dead last year, was under investigation for using sold-out Taylor Swift tickets to lure teen to his office and show him her breasts, then trying to buy families silence. We have never heard a statement from Ron or Casey DeSantis about this situation, and I just find it to be hypocritical because, as you said, right, whether it's money laundering, wire fraud, or accusing high-profile people who support President Trump and are visiting the state of Florida of sex crimes, it just seems like everything that Ron DeSantis is accusing other people of, he or his political allies and associates are the ones that are guilty of it. And this little pedophile scandal is a perfect example.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely associated with the rules for thee but not for me crowd.
Yeah, we have to do something about that because I think that we run the risk of actually getting a Democrat governor in the state of Florida if Republican corruption is allowed to take place and be rampant in the Florida legislature without pushback from legislators like yourself, because people are going to think, wow, these Republicans really are corrupt, and so maybe I should vote Democrat. And I'm not encouraging people to vote Democrat, but I've always said that whoever decides to run for governor in 2026 was going to be burdened with the corrupt actions in the aftermath of the corrupt activity that took place during the Ron DeSantis administration. For example, the insurance crisis, right? That is something that impacts people. It's a really serious matter. People are losing their homes. People are not able to retire and live here in the state of Florida. People who are living paycheck to paycheck or on Social Security are not seeing a shift in their Social Security payments as it relates to the increasing cost of living here in the state of Florida as a result of Ron DeSantis's absurd and corrupt tort reform. And so I think that people like you need to be applauded for taking people in your own party on and challenging them and holding them accountable for their corruption and their alleged crimes. Because if we don't take the trash out in our own party, how can we tell voters to vote for us so we can take the trash out on the other side of the aisle?
And what I can tell you is Governor DeSantis, during my committee meeting last week, scheduled a press conference in my home district, for the exact same time and tried to make it for the exact same length as my committee meeting. And I have gotten nothing. In that press conference he did in my district last week when I was over here doing work,
to talk about
doing my job. He trashed me and trashed everything we're doing in the legislature. And in response, I've gotten nothing but support from Republicans in my home district. Everybody wants to know exactly why they took this money and used it for political purposes. They treated taxpayer money like their own personal piggy bank. Everyone's offended by it. And I've got nothing but encouragement from local Republicans to keep doing what I'm doing. So I do think there's a sea change right now where people are seeing Ron DeSantis more and more for what he actually is. And I think the more temper tantrums he throws as we're going through this process, the less and less relevant he becomes.
Absolutely. Any last comments or thoughts or any upcoming announcements that you want to share with my viewers before you depart this evening? I know that you've already said that you are, encouraging the prosecution of James Uthmeyer. You think that Pam Bondi and Kash Patel should get involved in this matter to have a federal investigation into this alleged wire fraud and money laundering. Anything else you want the viewers to know? How can the viewers watching tonight, many of whom are very familiar with Ron DeSantis' corruption because it's a subject we cover extensively here and have been since the inception of the show. I believe the very first episode of Loomer Unleashed was actually dedicated to covering Ron DeSantis' efforts changing the Florida Resign to Run law. So really, this program was essentially born and created out of exposing Ron DeSantis' crimes and his corruption, when you think about it. Anything else you want people to know or how they can help you in your efforts in holding him accountable? I know that the Florida legislature is coming to an end. There's about, 1 or 2 more weeks left? Maybe there's going to be an extension. But what can viewers do to assist you in making sure Ron DeSantis and James Uthmeyer do not get away with it?
Well, if by some bizarre circumstance James Uthmeyer stays out of prosecution, avoids prosecution, and is on the ballot next fall, I just want folks to remember this is the guy that treated Medicaid money like his own personal piggy bank and committed money laundering and wire fraud in the process, and justifies it by saying, Amendment 3 failed, so all my money laundering and wire fraud activities are justified. We do not want people like that in positions like the Florida Attorney General. So keep that in mind. If you have the opportunity, tell your friends and colleagues, tell your neighbors about the truth about what's going on up here in Tallahassee, because DeSantis will do everything in his power to mislead and deflect from what's actually going on. So don't let people get away with being intellectually lazy and just listening to sound bites. Look into what's actually going on, because it's very simple, the reality of the situation. And that's, I'm a guy not running for future office. Literally going home when I term out next year. I'm just livid I was just livid when I discovered that James Uthmeyer treated Medicaid money like his own personal piggy bank and is now brushing it off like it was no big deal. That offends me. It should offend any conservative Republican. It should offend any American who cares about how their taxpayer dollars be.
His screen appears to have frozen momentarily, so perhaps he needs to reconnect. I don't know what happened exactly, but anyway, in the meantime, while we're waiting for him to reconnect or figure out what happened with his screen, this is a serious issue. This is a serious issue, and this is where you see who's just a sycophant or who's a pure partisan and who actually is fighting for the people and is fighting for the truth. And Representative Andrade is a GOP representative. He represents portions of Escambia County and Santa Rosa County as well, and in Florida's 2nd district. And it's a pretty red area. And yet he's challenging the Republican governor of Florida and the Republican appointed Attorney General of Florida at a time when, Ron DeSantis is openly threatening members of the legislature in his last year as governor of Florida. So it's brave. It takes a lot of bravery. It takes a lot of courage. When you push back against Ron DeSantis, you face retaliation, especially here as a lawmaker in the state of Florida. Joe Gruters, who I know and have known for several years, spoke out about this extensively, the way that Ron DeSantis retaliated against him. And now you see Representative Andrade is being attacked by Ron DeSantis, who behaves like a mob boss. This is not a conspiracy. We've been talking about this for over a year now, right? Almost 2 years now here on Loomer Unleashed. Oh boy. Representative Andrade said, "We good? Sorry for that. I think they cut my Wi-Fi. I'm in the Capitol." Let me see. Are you able to reconnect to sign off? If not, I can close out for you. So breaking news, Representative Andrade says that he is currently doing this interview from the Florida Capitol in Tallahassee. And he says, "I think they cut my Wi-Fi." That is literally word for word what he just said to me. So that's pretty shocking. If they actually cut the Wi-Fi for an elected Republican representative who is on an interview right now with me from his office inside the Florida Capitol, that is shocking. That is shocking behavior. Oh, here we have him now. He said he's back. I can't hear him. Let's get his audio back up in my ear.
My audio working?
Yep. So you think that they cut your Wi-Fi? I mean, look, Ron DeSantis retaliates, and I wouldn't be surprised. Suspiciously and not so coincidentally, right? The cameras were also cut. Remember when what's that guy's name? Yeah. What's his, the guy I'm talking about, what's his name? It's on the tip of my tongue. The guy that was found dead outside Ron DeSantis's office after they had an argument and the cameras were turned off.
Oh, the attorney. I forget.
He was the attorney. Why am I forgetting his name?
My Wi-Fi definitely went out, but I don't know if it was malicious intent or just the Wi-Fi went out.
Yeah. I'm trying to find this guy's name. I don't know why for Peter Antonacci. Yes. So Peter Antonacci. So again, people say, oh, this sounds like a conspiracy, but no, Peter Antonacci too is another example. That's another scandal, right? That we still have never received any answers for is how did Peter Antonacci suspiciously die outside of Ron DeSantis's office in the Florida Capitol after having a very loud argument with him over the security of our elections? And why was his body left on the floor outside the governor's office for over 20 minutes? And the cameras, in the hallways were suspiciously cut, right? So there's a lot of shady stuff that happens with Ron DeSantis. We would be here all night long, and you've already been very generous with your time as it stands. But I don't think a lot of people really understand how deep the corruption goes with Ron DeSantis, how sinister it is, and just how dirty his people and his appointees are willing to play. I mean, I think this is why he's also shuffled all of his agency heads too. That's one thing I forgot to ask you tonight about why you think Ron DeSantis shuffled all his agency heads.
Well, again, he's got a shrinking circle, but I've always equated state government as far closer to Veep than House of Cards. I think there's a lot more bungling and incompetence than there is intentional wrongdoing. There's definitely intentional wrongdoing, but I think it was more accurately depicted by Veep than House of Cards from my perspective. So, if that helps with the perspective at all, there's definitely a lot of incompetence. There's this very small circle in the DeSantis camp, so they just don't have a deep bench anymore. I don't know if they ever really did have a truly deep bench, but they definitely don't have a deep bench now.
Is there any steps you can take to make sure, now that we know that this financial fraud has occurred, to make sure that the Florida Freedom Fund money isn't transferred over to Casey DeSantis if she does indeed run for governor of Florida?
I don't think it has to be transferred. That PC can use this money how it sees fit for state campaigns and elections. So, I mean, they could all but live off of that if they like. Neither of them could ever run for office. They'd still have access to that PC, and they could, pay for as many dinners and plane flights and, clothes as they like. So, no, I don't think there's a way to transfer it or prevent it from being transferred. It just exists the way it is. Although I do think we should probably look into some more campaign finance reform about how PACs can move money around and what they can be used for.
Absolutely. I definitely agree with that. You were cut off when I was asking you if there's anything else, any last minute comments that you had for the viewers. And then of course I'll let you go. So feel free to share any last comments, thoughts, or anything that would assist you and the efforts of the Republican legislator as they're trying to hold Ron DeSantis accountable in these last 2 weeks of session?
Yeah. So when folks are looking at this story and following along, there's no ulterior motive on my part. I'm not running for higher office. I'm terming out in a year and a half, and I'm going home. I'm just a guy that was livid when I found out James Uthmeyer treated Medicaid money like his own personal piggy bank, and then engaged and involved a ton of people in this conspiracy to commit money laundering and wire fraud. Unlike the other folks that you might hear commentating about this, I don't depend on a paycheck from Ron DeSantis or anybody else. I'm supposed to be representing my constituents to the best of my ability and making sure I'm a good steward of the taxpayer dollar. So when you look at the intent and the motivations of people in this circumstance, just keep that in mind. Like, I'm going to be attacked by DeSantis constantly. They accuse me of being like a stooge for big weed and a stooge for the plaintiff's bar, and that I want to go run for some higher office. You will never see me on a ballot ever again. I'm going to go home and focus on raising my 2 daughters and being the best husband I possibly can. You're just not going to see that from anybody else involved in this story. Anybody attacking me, they're motivated by different things. They have ulterior motivations. They want to run for higher office. They're more personally interested. They're self-interested. And that's
what would
one
you do?
thing.
I mean, obviously, this isn't a full-time. It is a full-time job, but the session itself is not a full-time commitment. And so you're saying that you're not going to be on the ballot again. What would you want to do? Because that's the problem, right? Is that people always complain that there's no good people in politics and that good people term out, but there's a reason why. It's because a lot of it is it's a lot to swallow. This is why you'll never see my name on a ballot again, ever again, even though people are always like, run for Congress again. I'm like, no, like I don't, the system doesn't want people who actually want to call out corruption. You quickly learn when you're running for office or once you're a part of the system that they want people who they can control and they want people who they can get to turn a blind eye. And that's true. It doesn't matter what position it is. They really honestly have such disdain and contempt for people that are watchdogs for the people.
Unlike Ron DeSantis, I do have a day job that's separate from my public office, and I do own my own house. So I'm looking forward to going back to the house that I already own and sticking with my day job. I am very much looking forward to looking back on my 8 years, being proud of my service, and knowing I did right by my constituents until the very end.
Well, I want to commend you, and I want to thank you for having the courage in a time and an era when so many people lack the courage, especially in the Florida legislature, where so many people were very scared to challenge Ron DeSantis over this last election season. And I hope that we will see some actual accountability from your efforts. I hope that we will see some criminal referrals and prosecutions and maybe even some political resignations. But with that, where do people go to follow you and support you?
Oh, man. I don't have a big social media following, but my tag on Twitter, I think, is r@AlexAndradeFL. Thanks, Laura, for tagging me in that tweet today. Feel free to follow along on Twitter. I don't really much have a social media presence otherwise. I really am just like the epitome of like a normal person who's just like doing this, trying to do a good job and go home. So if you want to follow me on Twitter, you'll see a lot of sarcasm, and I do like to troll back with all the DeSantis bots. It might be entertaining.
The Gator.
But otherwise, otherwise
oh,
you
yeah,
go.
where is that? Where is that investigation standing? Because now that Randy Fine's going to be in Congress, who's going to be overseeing that investigation into whether or not Ron DeSantis's state office was being used for official campaign purposes? Because we all know that the people who work in his office have access to those Gator accounts that they use to troll everybody and attack everybody from all those anonymous accounts online where they're constantly disparaging Trump supporters and attacking people who expose the governor. Is there actually going to be an investigation or an audit of the governor's devices? Because I think that people would be shocked if they saw that. I personally have a theory that people who work in Governor DeSantis's personal gubernatorial office were using the same devices to campaign for him, which is completely illegal. And I think that an investigation would prove me right.
I have no doubt. I have no doubt about it. I don't have any firsthand knowledge, but given how aggressive and how focused they were on Twitter constantly, all these public officials in the governor's office, I have no doubt. That's a good question. I don't know who's going to pick up the mantle from Randy on that stuff, on Senator, now Congressman Fine.
Maybe
but I'm sure
can.
someone.
You can do it.
I'm a little loaded up with this healthcare budget that I got to still negotiate for the state, and I'm still trying to figure out, who all was involved in this conspiracy. But if I get some free time, I'll definitely take it up.
Yeah, I know. Other lawmakers need to start picking up the slack, right? Alrighty.
I'm proud to serve with my colleagues, and I'm sure somebody will. We'll see. Thank you.
Well, yeah, thanks so much for coming on. Have a great evening. Keep us posted.
You too. See you guys.
Wonderful. Well, he gave us a lot of his time tonight, but I just felt that it was really important to have him on, and I told him ahead of time that we were going to keep him for at least an hour tonight because that's a lot to cover, and we were gaslit throughout this entire presidential election season. We were told that these things about Ron DeSantis and his staff were not true, and you heard from a lawmaker who himself was pressured and threatened by Ron DeSantis's team by having his appropriations cut for his constituents to endorse and support Ron DeSantis in the state of Florida for his presidential primary against President Trump in 2023, 2024. And it's real. All these claims about James Uthmeyer, Ron DeSantis' campaign manager, former chief of staff, and now the hand-selected AG, they're all true. So, again, you saw how these Republican lawmakers and these DeSantoids, or the Gatorheads as I like to call them, lied for over 2 years about their unethical behavior and conduct. And I'm just really hoping, God bless Representative Andrade, because so many Republicans are such pussies in the Florida legislature and they don't want to hold anybody accountable. So God bless them, and hopefully we see some accountability. But hope you enjoyed that segment. Before I continue with the rest of my coverage this evening on Loomer Unleashed, I want to take a moment to thank the sponsor of tonight's episode of Loomer Unleashed, and that, of course, is Kirk Elliott Precious Metals.
Breaking news. Laura Loomer has been canceled. The President of the United States has refused to take her phone calls as he suspects she is soon to be arrested.
Is Laura Loomer the most hated person on planet Earth? We want to hear from you, the listener, and get your opinion on whether or not...
Man, I tell you, I heard she got canceled. We coming for you, bitch. We coming to your house, Laura Loomer. We fight. We know where you live. We coming for you right now. We coming for your friends. We coming for your friend's little dog.
Frankly, I hope they throw her away for the rest of her life. I hope she dies.
She is currently on the run from authorities. She is described as armed and dangerous.
I just can't believe she's been getting away with it for this. An angry mob appears to be forming outside the home of journalist Laura Loomer.
What is wrong with you? Why are you not panicking?
Because I called Kirk Elliott Precious Metals, and I learned how adding gold and silver to my portfolio is one of the safest ways to not just grow my finances, but to also protect them from the uncertainty of the future. So I'm fine.
Call economist Kirk Elliott at 720-605-3900 or schedule a call online at kepm.com/Loomer to learn how you can safely grow your retirement portfolio with precious metals.
I want to go to the chat, get your comments, thoughts about that interview, the long interview. But hey, people need to hear the truth about Ron DeSantis and his corruption. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of coverage about this on Fox News or Newsmax or any of these so-called right-wing networks. So people need to know the truth about how corrupt Ron DeSantis is, because he should not be able to leave office and have a solid legacy. This is a man who has abused his power to threaten people and to do very unethical things to get what he wants and to harm others who get in his way as governor throughout his time in Tallahassee, as we have exposed here. SOS01 said, Alex A. is a beautiful American. May he and his family be blessed with health and security and joy. You can scroll up. La Hustla, love this commercial. Thank you. Be sure that you're reposting the live link. We're still live for another 20 minutes or so, so please be sure that you repost it, share it on X at Laura Loomer. Follow me on X at Laura Loomer and Loomer Unleashed, and also be sure you click the follow button on Rumble. Let's see. Let's scroll up and see what people are saying. Read some of these comments. Everybody's saying many good segments in this show. Yeah. I mean, look, we definitely bring the juicy scoops here on Loomer Unleashed. And a lot of people are saying, oh, this whole thing about Pete Hegseth and Ron DeSantis isn't true. I'm telling you, it's true. My sources tell me that when President Trump met with Casey DeSantis and Ron DeSantis at his golf club before the confirmation of Pete Hegseth, it was to establish Ron's interest in potentially becoming the Plan B option for Pete Hegseth if he didn't survive the nomination process. And so now Pete Hegseth has been confirmed. And look, I like Pete. I'm not against Pete Hegseth. I'm trying to expose this coup. Now that Pete Hegseth has been confirmed, you see in the aftermath of Signalgate, there's all these calls to fire Pete Hegseth, unfortunately, instead of holding Michael Waltz accountable, even though it's the NSC and the NSA that are rotten, and you have officials at the DNI that are rotten, you have officials at DOD, you have officials all throughout our intel agencies who are rotten, right? I described it last night as a Koch coup, right? A Koch brother coup, I said on X. But there's still this shadow operation to push out Pete Hegseth and convince the replacement to be Ron DeSantis. And even Roger Stone confirmed today that his sources are telling him the same thing. So don't be surprised if you hear it, or if they do fire Pete Hegseth. And again, I'm a supporter. I like him. I think we need to defend Pete Hegseth. I don't see why he should be fired. But if Pete Hegseth does somehow end up getting fired or replaced, don't be surprised if Ron DeSantis is announced as his replacement. And when you hear that, you'll know who you heard it from first. Another interesting story I wanted to talk about tonight, because again, it shows the lack of vetting in the Trump administration, and it goes to show you just like the level of chaos that exists in the Trump administration as it pertains to political appointees, cabinet members, and some of these new hires defying the authority of President Trump and his administration is a story that I broke earlier tonight. Our guest about a week or so ago, Justin Goodman from the White Coat Waste Project, when he was discussing all of the experiments with Fauci that they've exposed and all the animal testing, we had Justin and White Coat Waste on the program on tax day, if you recall, to talk about how $20 billion of your money every single year goes towards animal testing here in the United States, especially in programs funded by the NIH, which was previously run by Dr. Fauci, who was removed and has since been replaced by Dr. Jay Bhattacharya. That's the new Trump appointee. But disturbingly, and I guess like not surprisingly, because like we've seen so much oppositional defiance within the Trump administration. I mean, this is not a secret. We talk about it here. And I said that we were going to have a vetting crisis segment going forward here on Loomer Unleashed to talk about all the vetting crises. Dr. Jay Bhattacharya knows that Donald Trump doesn't want any more animal testing on mice for the purpose of doing transgender experiments. It recently went viral in videos, and I think we may have a video. I think we actually have a video of President Trump talking about this, maybe not, but there were videos online, you could find them yourself, of President Trump addressing the state of Congress about the transgender mice, if you recall. And even Elon Musk said, wow, can you believe it? Like, we found out that they're doing studies on mice to see if they're transgender. And we were told that this funding was going to end. Well, even under the current Trump administration, as of last week, according to records from archives taken of the NIH website, last week, the grant for the transgender mice study out of the Indiana University was suspiciously renewed. Okay. We have the screenshots. You can go to my tweet about this and you can see that the grant began during the Biden administration. You can scroll up to the yellow images right there. Actually, go to my tweet, because it's in the screenshot on my tweet. I don't believe it's added into the article yet. Go to my tweet on my timeline. But I showed a side-by-side of the two different budget end dates, right? And these pages have since been archived in case they try to dispute this journalistic report. One of the screenshots clearly says that the ending was supposed to end in June of 2025. Just go to my main page on X and you'll see it. It's one of my last tweets. Just go to my main page and go on my timeline. If you scroll down, click on Laura Loomer. Let's scroll down. Okay. Scroll down a little bit more. Just a little bit more. A little bit more. Right there. If you're following along, here's my X account. You can see there's a screenshot. I had this put together, made a collage. Here's a statement made by President Trump after he gave his address to Congress, where he said, yes, Biden spent millions on transgender animal experiments, because when he gave this address to Congress, he was mocked and people said, oh, what is he talking about? There's no such thing as transgender mice. I believe even Bill Maher was mocking this recently on an interview with Charlie Kirk. A lot of people were saying that this wasn't true. It is indeed true. You can see here, it says NIH, and if you look at the screenshot of the report, it says gonadal hormones as mediators of sex and gender influences in asthma, right? But if you go and you look at the, the breakdown of the study, it clearly talks about making transgender mice, right? The budget end date says June 2025, budget start date, July 2024. This was initiated under the Biden administration, and it was supposed to end within the next 2 months under the Trump administration. We were actually told that the funding was already cut. But last week, they quietly went back into the NIH database under the Trump administration at the NIH, which is now led by Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, a Trump appointee. And what does that say at the bottom right there? If you could zoom in, maybe you can't. If not, then you can just, look at it yourself. But if you can't zoom in, oh, Canon's going to zoom in for us. Scroll over. It now says June 30th, 2026. So it's been extended an entire year into the Trump administration. So original budget date, revised budget date. So that is exclusive evidence, okay? That is undisputable proof. If you go back to the Loomer article that we released today on the website, you can scroll up to the title. NIH renews funding for cruel Fauci beagle and trans mice experiments under new Trump administration. So it's not just the transgender mice experiment that they decided to renew, but also they decided to renew the abuse of beagles in laboratories. You can scroll down. We'll go through the article just so that you can see what is happening. It's an abomination that this is already happening under the Trump administration after we were told that things like this were going to end. Here are photographs that have been obtained by the White Coast Waste Project of these experiments where they put these beagles inside these tents and they release flies so that the dogs, without any type of pain medicine, can have their entire faces eaten alive by these flies, right? And we were told that this was inhumane and that these projects were going to be defunded under the new Trump administration. Well, you can scroll down. In advance of White Coast Waste interview with Loomer Unleashed, Loomer broke a new White Coast Waste investigation exposing how the Biden-Harris National Institute of Health paid billionaire Moderna co-founder Robert Langer's new biotech company to torture beagles to test an experimental weight loss drug. The $322,000 grant was given to Langer's company in September of 2024, and it's still being funded until August 2025 under the new Trump administration. We talked about that extensively last week here on Loomer Unleashed. They could easily rescind the funding and end this immediately, given the fact that Donald Trump is president and he has a new NIH director. And as I said, it begs the question, why is the Trump NIH still paying this Trump-hating mRNA pioneer and vaccine billionaire to abuse dogs? And the question also remains, why are they still conducting animal abuse experiments in laboratories funded by the NIH here in the United States and abroad, including in the very own NIH headquarter office where Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, the NIH director, works himself every single day, or at least every single week when he reports to work as the NIH director. You can scroll down. Trump's NIH headquarters, where the new Trump-appointed NIH director, Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, is headquartered, still houses a lab, right? As I say this now to you live on air under the Trump administration, to this day, right? We were promised this was going to end. They still have a lab that has been torturing beagles in deadly septic shock experiments for a quarter century, and they plan to continue their abuse of animals on taxpayer dime. White Coat Waste uncovered that NIH and the Pentagon are currently paying a laboratory in China to abuse 300 beagles per week in drug tests. So, again, I'm going to personally reach out to Pete Hegseth about this because I can't imagine that Pete Hegseth would be okay with this. And I wonder if he's even aware of this. And Dr. Bhattacharya, I know, is aware of this, and he keeps on, saying things like, oh, yeah, I really like the work that White Coat Waste does. But the question is, if Dr. Jay Bhattacharya is aware of this, why is he allowing for this to continue? So we need to start getting more aggressive on Dr. Jay Bhattacharya because he's essentially he's allowing for animal abuse. They're allowing for, and we're currently paying in this joint partnership with the NIH and the Pentagon, paying a laboratory in China where my dear Mecca, my dog that I rescued from a Chinese meat market, they are so barbaric to animals in China. They eat them. They eat animals. Like, my dog is probably no more than 10 pounds, sometimes 9 pounds. And they were trying to eat her. And mind you, she was emaciated when I adopted her. She was 7 pounds, which is a lot for a dog that size, like, to be that emaciated. So they treat animals horribly there, and our own government is paying for this. And we discussed the previous work that they did on the last episode of Loomer Unleashed, but now it's been brought to my attention that they are now, even to this day, under the current Trump administration, renewing and still paying for these torture experiments on beagles. The contract was awarded under Biden-Harris and is still active until the end of May 2025 and could be extended if Bhattacharya doesn't take immediate action. So it's up for renewal, and May is right around the corner, and we are this close to having those beagle experiments renewed for another term of funding under the current Trump administration if Dr. Bhattacharya and Donald Trump do not take action. So really disturbing to see that this is happening under the current Trump administration, especially given the fact that before the end of his first term, as you can see here, Trump canceled grants to some Chinese labs, but there are still 20 other Chinese animal testing laboratories that are still eligible for NIH funding. Also, as we discussed on the last episode of Loomer Unleashed, you have Dr. Nora Valkol, who is a longtime NIH bureaucrat. She serves as the director of the National Institute of Drug Abuse at NIH, which funded this Chinese dog lab and paid for abuses, for example, like injecting dogs with cocaine and fentanyl, and also sex party drug tests on transgender animals. I don't really understand what that is, but these are like very degenerate experiments, if you want to call it that. It just sounds like bestiality and animal abuse, if you ask me. And this lady has managed to keep her job, but hopefully she's held accountable as well. And you can see the screenshots. I know it may be shocking and unbelievable to all of you, but see, it says China. Okay. Mice, dogs, cats, animal experiments, China, awarding office from the National Institute of Health. So if we truly are implementing tariffs on China and taking a strong approach on China under the current Trump administration, why is the current Trump administration allowing for our National Institute of Health to use our taxpayer money to fund a lab in China that is torturing dogs, cats, and mice? It's not going to end until May 31st, 2025. And unless Dr. Bhattacharya or President Trump explicitly says otherwise, this contract is up for renewal. So, again, very disturbing. According to White Coat Waste, the NIH just renewed a $3 million project funded by Dr. Fauci at the University of Missouri, Columbia, that infests hundreds of beagle puppies with ticks. You can scroll up. This is just brutal. In vaccine experiments, records obtained by White Coat Waste show that the puppies have had their fur shaved and capsules of full and hungry ticks glued. They actually glue these ticks to their bare skin after shaving them. And the dogs are intentionally denied pain relief. The grant was scheduled to end in May of 2025, and the Trump NIH just extended these animal abuse experiments until May of 2026. Now, do I think that Donald Trump is sitting in the Oval Office saying, oh, yep, let's go abuse dogs? No, I think that Donald Trump would be absolutely disgusted to learn that his administration is renewing the torture of these animals, which includes infesting infesting puppies with ticks and letting them die after getting septic shock. So if President Trump were to be alerted to this, I think that he would immediately call Dr. Jay Bhattacharya and tell him to end these horrific grants and also end animal testing. But again, this is the vetting crisis in the Trump administration. Why are they allowing Trump to give an address to Congress and mock the transgender mice? We actually have the video here. We'll play it for you momentarily. And then quietly going and funding under the Trump administration an extension of these transgender mice experiments. It's almost like people in the Trump administration who work for the president are deliberately trying to sabotage him and embarrass him. I'm going to go ahead and play this clip and let you decide for yourself. Let's go ahead and play the clip.
Will be ending the flagrant waste of taxpayer dollars. Just listen to some of the appalling waste we have already identified. $8 million for making mice transgender. This is real.
Yeah, this is real. And for some reason, it's still happening under the current Trump administration, as I said, and they have decided to extend quietly, right? Quietly change the termination date for the budget, and they have extended it for another year. So if Donald Trump is so appalled by transgender mice experiments, then I suggest he call over to his NIH director, who he appointed, and tell him to immediately end that contract with the Indiana University. This is from a screenshot of the documents that were uncovered by White Coat Waste. You can see here that in this experiment, they're talking about infesting the dogs with ticks. They say that a dog is commonly used species to perform a preclinical pharmacokinetic study. Beagle dog is docile, cute, and easy to domesticate, so it has been the best choice of the different kinds of dogs based on the corresponding drug efficiency study. So they're actually admitting in these documents, it's so barbaric, that the reason why they want to choose beagles for these torture experiments is because beagles, they have identified, are the most docile and easy to domesticate, and they don't fight back. So they're trying to find dogs that are not going to fight back when they are being physically abused and tortured in laboratories. The NIH also just extended a $3.1 million grant for transgender animal testing that White Coat Waste exposed last year. Again, President Trump called this out during his congressional address. And so the question is, why under the Trump administration are they now trying to embarrass the president by funding transgender mice experiments? I know this is all very shocking. Scroll down. Some of these images are hard to see. Scroll down. Let's show them the image of the dog. Here's an image of the dog that is having its skin eaten alive by these ticks. Poor dog. That's so sad. Wish I could rescue all of them. So horrible. So again, you can give people the benefit of the doubt. But we're almost at 100 days. After April 30th, which is quickly approaching in the next 8 days, we're going to be officially at the first 100 days of the Trump administration. And so I can confirm that Dr. Jay Bhattacharya saw portions of my show from the last episode. I know that for a fact. I won't say how I found that out, but sources tell me that Dr. Jay Bhattacharya saw segments from my last show in which I was questioning him and criticizing him for his leadership at NIH, asking why these animal experiments haven't ended. And so it's on his radar. He's aware of it. And so now the question is he going to use his authority to shut down these labs? And is he going to allow for animal torture to take place in his very own office where he shows up to work every single day? There is a live beagle laboratory inside the NIH where they are abusing animals. Animals are probably dying and being tortured right now as I speak to you live on air right now in this laboratory at the NIH headquarters. And you have to ask yourself, what kind of monster is able to go to work and know that in the same building where they are hanging out, answering phones, doing work, eating lunch, hanging out with colleagues, that animals in a nearby room or facility are being tortured? It's horrific and it needs to end. So I really hope that President Trump pro-life president and as a pro-life leader also sets a new standard. Instead of us trusting the science, the fake science, as we saw under Anthony Fauci, and instead of us having science weaponized against us to subjugate us and deprive us of our rights, hopefully President Trump will take a more humane approach and will use what we know about science and encourage, advancements in things like AI technology to replace inhumane practices like animal testing. Because look, this is the kind of stuff that you would expect to see under the Biden administration, but we're 100 days into the Trump administration and people are aware of this. So as far as I'm concerned, there's literally no excuse after the end of these first 100 days for people to say, oh, well, I had no idea that this was happening. I had no idea that dogs are being tortured, because they 100% are aware of it. And, I'm sitting back and I'm going to be judging people very strongly and critically, depending on how they respond to this, because it's just an abomination that our own Pentagon is working with NIH to fund torture labs of beagles in China. So I am going to be speaking to Pete Hegseth, who I've known for many years personally, about this matter, because this is an abomination. Before we close out, I want to take a moment to thank the sponsor of tonight's episode of Loomer Unleashed, and that, of course, is Kirk Elliott Precious Metals. Please be sure that you visit their website, Kirk Elliott Precious Metals, KEPM.com/Loomer is their website, KEPM.com/Loomer. You can call Dr. Kirk Elliott at 720-605-3900. Gold is at a record high. Dr. Kirk Elliott was on my program last week to talk about why now is a great time to invest in precious metals like gold and silver, and why people in global markets are investing in more gold, and why they're buying up more gold, and why we're watching the dollar crash as gold continues to rise. So we're going to go ahead and play this commercial for you one more time. I would encourage all of you to expand and diversify your portfolio. Contact Dr. Kirk Elliott tomorrow. They have a great staff. I've heard nothing but great reviews from and feedback from people who are viewers of Loomer Unleashed. And they really do prioritize Loomer Unleashed viewers. You can see here they went as far as creating their very own landing page for the viewers here of Loomer Unleashed. You just let them know that Laura Loomer sent you, and Kirk and his team of professionals over at Kirk Elliott Precious Metals will answer all your questions about investing in precious metals.
Breaking news. Laura Loomer has been canceled. The President of the United States has refused to take her phone calls as he suspects she is soon to be arrested.
Is Laura Loomer the most hated person on planet Earth? We want to hear from you, the listener, and get your opinion on whether or not...
Man, I tell you, I heard she got canceled. We coming for you, bitch. We coming to your house, Laura Loomer. We fight. We know where you live. We coming for you right now. We coming for your friends. We coming for your friend's little dog.
Frankly, I hope they throw her away for the rest of her life. I hope she dies.
She is currently on the run from authorities. She is described as armed and dangerous.
I just can't believe she's been getting away with it for this. An angry mob appears to be forming outside the home of journalist Laura Loomer.
What is wrong with you? Why are you not panicking?
Because I called Kirk Elliott Precious Metals, and I learned how adding gold and silver to my portfolio is one of the safest ways to not just grow my finances, but to also protect them from the uncertainty of the future. So I'm fine.
Call economist Kirk Elliott at 720-605-3900 or schedule a call online at kepm.com/Loomer to learn how you can safely grow your retirement portfolio with precious metals.
Definitely check them out. Put your comments and questions in the chat before we close out tonight. Something really funny happened today, too. I mean, the media is obsessed with talking about me, but there was this really funny article that came out today. It was an MSNBC article. Do we have the MSNBC article? It was so funny. I thought it was a joke at first when somebody sent it to me, and then I was like, oh my God, that's a real article. Hilarious. Here we go. MSNBC wrote this article today. Oh my God. Laura Loomer wants you to snitch on your immigrant neighbors. That's so funny. Late last month, Laura Loomer, a prominent MAGA influencer who in 2017 called herself pro-white nationalism, invited Jacob Engels, a Proud Boys associate and writer for the conspiracy theory pushing blog. My God, it's like, how many times are they going to use these adjectives to describe me? Gateway Pundit to her podcast to discuss a new app. Of course, I don't want to use the name of my podcast. It's called Loomer Unleashed. To discuss a new app that would help people they see as true patriots support their neighbors and get paid for it. Yeah, they're illegal alien neighbors, right? It's called Ice Raid US, Engels said, explaining how users could snap photos of illegal aliens. The app apparently then sends the photos, including the metadata identifying where and when they were taken, to law enforcement. This is really, really interesting because it's taking up so much off the backs of law enforcement, and we're doing it as citizens, and you have the opportunity to earn crypto for reporting and deporting illegals. Loomer, one of President Donald Trump's close confidants, was thrilled. If you're sick and tired of the illegal alien construction workers making a bunch of noise at the house next door to yours, you can actually call it in, she said. Get that cryptocurrency for reporting these individuals. It's almost like a bounty. It's unclear how functional Ice Raid US, created by a relatively unknown cryptocurrency entrepreneur named Jason Myers, really is, or to what degree it's actually coordinating with law enforcement. What is clear is that the app's launch earned coverage across far-right media, including former Florida Representative Matt Gaetz' OAN show, and spoke to a growing hunger among the MAGA faithful cultivated by the Republican Party to become vigilantes, informants, and snitches to target immigrants. No, illegal aliens. Like, they're trying to act like we're just out there trying to go hunt immigrants down, when in reality, we're talking about illegals. Haya Rachik, an influential Libs of TikTok creator whose viral propaganda has falsely labeled queer people groomers and pedophiles and has been linked to a wave of anti-LGBTQ harassment threats, recently turned her sights on immigrants. Oh, they're talking about, oh, look at this. Look at this. She went out with Kirsty Num. I mean, it's just so ridiculous. You could scroll down. Talking about how, William Horn, a history professor at the University of Maryland, told me the most worst and parallel, the closest thing to what we're seeing now, is the assaults on the Reconstruction state governments after the Civil War, when the Ku Klux Klan, along with other white vigilante groups and lynch mobs, which is hilarious because Haya and I are both Jewish, by the way, just in case they wanted to leave that part out. So now we're like KKK members, according to MSNBC. Along with other vigilante groups and lynch mobs, partner with law enforcement to target Black Southerners. So because we want to round up illegal aliens and promote the deportation of illegals, we're basically like the KKK rounding up and lynching Blacks. It's unbelievable. This guerrilla war helped end Reconstruction, the federal government abandoning its nascent experiment in multiracial democracy and ushering in decades of Jim Crow. Historically, failing to take aggressive action against white vigilantism all but guarantees escalating white vigilantism and the creation of some form of an apartheid regime. So apparently I'm a white vigilante, you guys, because on my show a couple weeks ago, I decided to have a podcast in which I interviewed an individual, another investigative journalist, and we had a discussion about an app called Ice Raid. Anyway. And then they have the video of me. Can we get that video? What is it? Oh, it's the Chris Hayes video at the very bottom of the clip. They're playing that clip right there. Just so ridiculous. You can scroll up a little bit. Let's see. When Loomer and Engels, scroll down a little bit more. When Loomer and Engels were discussing the Ice Raid app, Loomer took a moment to recount an extremely exciting encounter she recently had. I actually ended up catching up with Tom Homan, our border czar, in the airport here in Palm Beach, Florida, and I congratulated him on his deportation orders and his success thus far as the border czar, Loomer said, queuing up a video of the interaction. Can we expect to see some more jihadist students rounded up soon and deported? The video shows Loomer asking Homan, referring to terrifying incidents of mass ICE agents disappearing college students. Oh, boo-hoo! It's so terrifying! These kids are chanting death to America and death to Israel and waving Hamas flags, and it's so terrifying! Oh, we're gonna cry! Oh, I was gonna cry! I mean, like, honestly, the theatrics are just so crazy. It's so terrifying, you guys. We're rounding up students that want to kill Jews and Christians. I mean, these people are just so hyperbolic, out of control. Disappearing college students off the streets for their support of pro-Palestinian causes. No, I'm pretty sure that it's because they were actually caught supporting Hamas, but hey, revisionist history, right? Including in the case of Tufts University doctoral student Rumesa Öztürk for the apparent transgression of writing an op-ed in the school newspaper. No, they always try to make it sound like everything is just critical of Israel. I have no problem with people criticizing Israel, okay? But if you're here on a visa and you're openly calling for support of terrorist organizations that are recognized by our own State Department as being designated Islamic terrorist organizations, including Hamas and Hezbollah, and we have a lot of video footage of students waving Hamas and Hezbollah flags and, praising Al-Quds and Soleimani and Nasrallah on college campuses. Okay, yeah, you're going to be deported and you should have your green card or your visa taken away from you because you are supporting jihad on American soil. So crazy. The video shows Homan smiling at the question before looking into the camera. Just sit back and watch, he said. That's right. Just sit back and watch because this is the era of accountability, or at least that's what I voted for. So hopefully we see a lot more mass deportations soon, because I love watching MSNBC reporters cry. I don't really give a shit if you want to call me a KKK member or a white vigilante. Whatever, dude. If that's what it means to want secure borders in my country and to support mass deportations, then I guess you're going to call me like, the new chief Klansman. What is it that they call, what do they call them? Like the chief dragon? What is the name that they use for these chief Klansmen? They have all these crazy names. They have all these crazy names in different uniforms. What is it, my producer's in my ear? What did they call them? A grand wizard, right? But they have all these different uniforms with like dragons, and they have all these different symbols on them. I guess you can start calling me Grand Wizard Laura Loomer. Should I get a wizard hat for my next episode of Loomer Unleashed? Should I show up to the next episode of Loomer Unleashed decked out in a KKK Klansman outfit? Because honestly, this is just so hysterical and so funny to me. Last time I checked, the KKK didn't let Jewish people join. I don't know. Let's go to Google and look at Klansman outfits. Maybe my viewers can help me pick one out. Oh, the red one. Look at the red one over there. That's gonna match my red hair. That one looks interesting. Like a little cone head with the eyes carved out. Yeah, last time I checked, Jewish people weren't allowed in the KKK, so maybe they have changed their application standards, or maybe they have changed their terms of membership. But according to MSNBC, I'm now a Klansman. But hey, if I'm gonna be like the top Klansman according to Christopher Matthias over at MSNBC, I might as well be a Grand Wizard. Am I right? Let's go down. I want to hear what everyone in the chat has to think about my my prospective wardrobe. Grand Dragon. Yeah. Maybe I can call Ye. I do have Ye's number. I could call Ye. You remember Ye? Kanye West? Gonna be like, yo, Ye, let me borrow your KKK outfit. Oh my God. And then tomorrow, watch, it's going to be like, Trump ally Laura Loomer says that she has aspirations to become a KKK Grand Wizard. Trump ally Laura Loomer said that she wanted to call her good friend Ye West to borrow his KKK Klansman outfit. Like, I was joking the other day on Loomer Unleashed that because I used the term uppity black to describe John Hope Bryant, right, after he was invited to the Treasury by Scott Bessent. And I was like, watch, shout out to the Media Matters Clipper who is watching this episode right now, who's going to do an article about how I called John Hope Bryant an uppity black man, and how I basically said Josh Shapiro had nobody to blame but himself for the fires. And I swear to God, I think we can even get this pulled up right now. If you go to Google and you type in Laura Loomer Media Matters, they literally wrote those two articles. It's almost like they were watching live. I swear they must have like a designated media clipper. If you type in Laura Loomer Media Matters, they wrote two articles, and it was exactly that. Go to news, like click on new. Here we go. See, like literally word for word. Laura Loomer calls CEO John Hope Bryant uppity and DEI hire. And then go back to the other page. Trump ally Laura Loomer blames Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro for arson attack. It's so funny because I literally said, "Watch, this is what they're gonna say about me. They're gonna try to blame me and say that that it's my fault or take those parts where I was obviously baiting Media Matters." So I don't know. I guess we'll have to see. We'll have to see how long it takes them to write an article saying Trump ally Laura Loomer says that she has aspirations to become the next Grand Wizard of the KKK. You just have to mock these people because they're so retarded. You know, like, obviously I'm not a member of the KKK. Obviously I would never even be allowed to join the KKK because I'm Jewish. But hey, whatever. If MSNBC wants to entertain the idea that I'm a white vigilante, then I suppose I can entertain their I don't know what to call it. I don't know, hysteria? Manic episode? What are we going to call it? Is it hysteria, a manic episode, delusions of grandeur? I don't know, schizophrenia. What do we call this? The MSNBC reporters accusing me of having aspirations to be a KKK member, white vigilante. I don't even know. These people are just so fucked up. Let's go to the chat. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Or I could also just wear a burqa, same thing, right? I mean, white supremacy, Sharia supremacy. What's the difference? Am I right? Let's see. Any questions? Let's scroll up. More questions. Someone said I'll get super canceled. Yeah, I will. I'll get super canceled. If you guys enjoyed this program, please be sure that you subscribe to me on X at Laura Loomer, or be sure that you click the follow and the Get Loomered button on the Rumble channel, which will take you to my locals page where you can sign up to subscribe to support my work for $7 a month or $70 per year. I really appreciate it. Or you can also do so on my Buy Me a Coffee page, which is buymeacoffee.com/Laura Loomer. Buymeacoffee.com/Laura Loomer. You can subscribe for a monthly contribution, or you can also make a one-time donation to support the work that we're doing here at Loomer Unleashed. With that, I want to thank everybody so much for tuning in tonight. I will see you this Thursday for another live episode of Loomer Unleashed. Please be sure that you're following me on Rumble, rumble.com/Laura Loomer. Follow me on X at Laura Loomer and on X at Loomer Unleashed. Also, be sure that you're following me on Truth Social at Laura Loomer, and I will see you this Thursday for another live episode of Loomer Unleashed. See you then.
There is a young female journalist, conservative journalist, by the name of Laura Loomer.
If America's men acted like Laura Loomer, our problems would be fixed in about 5 minutes.
Chained herself to Twitter.